Pleasant good morning, Trinidad and Tobago, and let me take the opportunity on behalf of the Leader of the Opposition and Political Leader of the United National Congress to welcome you, the viewing and listening audience, to another of the United National Congress's Sunday morning press briefing from the office of the Leader of the Opposition. And this morning, myself and my colleague in the upper house, Senator David Nakhid, we will focus on the PNM of Dr. Keith Rowley that continues to ignore abuse at children's homes throughout the length and breadth of our country, and corruption within the cabinet of Trinidad and Tobago. And before we get into the crux of this morning's press conference, of course, myself and Senator Nakhid, he will also take the opportunity. I want to, on behalf of, as I said, the Leader of the Opposition and Political Leader of the United National Congress, Mrs. Kamala Persad-Bissessar, I wish to extend a happy and rewarding Mother's Day to all mothers throughout Trinidad and Tobago and the world, and more so, if I sound a bit biased, to the mothers within the constituency of Cuba South. Being a father, a husband, a son, a brother, and a member of Parliament, I see only too well the importance of motherhood in shaping our homes, our communities, and our country. I'm personally grateful for the mother in my life. Let me say Happy Mother's Day to my mother, Tara Indara Singh, and thank her for the many sacrifices she made in raising myself and my siblings. And let me say Happy Mother's Day to my wife, Alina, for the sacrifices she made, or continues to make, in raising our two daughters. And let me say Happy Mother's Day to Mrs. Kamala Persad-Bissessar for the sacrifices she has made in mothering our great party and all the mothers within our great party, and that motherly role she conducted during her tenure as the Prime Minister and continues in serving all mothers and Trinidad and Tobago. In that regard, I want to say that mothers all over our country have had it harder than ever, from losing their jobs to fighting the COVID-19 pandemic, to losing loved ones, to homeschooling and online classes, to increased violence against women, to the higher cost of living. Mothers have been facing an excruciating and extraordinarily difficult time in these last couple of years, and it is abominable to know that our Prime Minister has described women as golf courses which needs to be groomed, while mothers are struggling to keep rent and provide food for their families, whilst his government continues to eliminate food card support for vulnerable women. And while some mothers are battling domestic violence and fighting to protect their children, the Prime Minister dismissingly said that he's not in their choice of men, while mothers are fighting to protect their children from harm. Dr. Rowley has presided over periods of unprecedented assault, murder, and other crimes against women and citizens on the whole. So, we all know the importance, and without further ado, in terms of mothers to our nation, I want to invite Senator David Nakhid, who will take the floor in addressing the issue of abuse at our children's home in our country. Senator Nakhid.
Thank you. Excellent presentation, MP Indara Singh. First of all, in the name of God, most gracious, most merciful, I'd like to thank all of you for being here, and especially on this wonderful Mother's Day. A special greeting goes out to all the mothers of Trinidad and Tobago and indeed worldwide. A special, as we say, shout out to the mother of our party, Kamala Prasad Bisesa, and all the women that work so hard within the party to bring us to where we are. I would like personally to extend Happy Mother's Day to my mother, deceased, but who played such a critical role in my bringing and in the nurturing of our family. I would like to also thank Jamal and Ali Kazim, the mothers of my children, and the role that they have played in my own stability and development over the years. It's, as everyone knows who are close to me, the only thing that would get me emotional is when I speak about mothers and the role that they play. So it is indeed sad that on such a day we come to the substantive issue that we deal with now, which is what happened at our Children's Authority, what happened to those in those homes under the jurisdiction of the Children's Authority. First of all, I acknowledge the report, scathing though it was, by Madam Justice Judith Jones on the activity within or inactivity within from the Children's Authority as relates to the residential centers. And I have to let it know, I have to give you the backdrop that my locus standi in this particular case was that I was invited by the task force headed by Justice Judith Jones to be a witness, to give my testimony. Subsequently, I did so in August 2021, and I waited for the report. I myself was asked about the report subsequently when we heard nothing for several months by the political leader and by DPL Julian John. Unbeknownst to us, that report was dealt with expeditiously by Madam Justice Judith Jones and given in December 2021 to the line minister, which should have been Ayanna Webster Roy. And this is where things get very interesting. I find it more than passing strange that no mention of myself was made in that task force report, although evidence that I gave in that report ends up in the report. But I leave it to the media to delve into that. Our issue at hand is what happened to that report. That report, as I said previously, was delivered on December 2021 and only revealed 5 months later by Ayanna Webster Roy. Now, that report, what prompted that report relates to 5 escaped boys, 2 of them subsequently murdered, Simeon Daniel, Antonio Francois, murdered in Mockshine lands in Laventil. We also will delve into that at another time as to who and why and what happened to those 2 boys. But the report provided us with a lot of detail as to what happened within those residential care and those homes under the Children's Authority. And it's instructive to note that the authority has a lawful mandate, and we have to be clear about that. It is required to monitor those community residences, foster homes, and nurseries, conduct periodic reviews to determine their compliance and so forth. And that is important because that means that once it's mandated, the authority is directly responsible and who's in charge of the authority. Now, the director of the authority at that time, Nicola Harvey Mitchell, seldom comes up as I think it's very, very anomalous that she has been mentioned, but there seems to be no direct responsibility given to her as to what happened to those two boys. Now, we have a release here from our political leader stating why did Ayanna Webster Roy wait a full 5 months before presenting it to the public, that report. Given the serious nature of this report, it is criminal that Webster Roy saw no urgency in ensuring these reported incidents of abuse be brought to an immediate stop. And that is where we take issue. 5 months that report laid on her desk, and we have to ask the question, did she reveal that report immediately to who's in charge of the office of the Prime Minister? Remember that her office, where she's responsible for gender and child affairs, falls under the office of the Prime Minister directly. So he is the one directly responsible for the Children's Authority. And so is Ayanna Webster Roy. There's a chain of command, followed by the Director of the Children's Authority, Nicola Harvey Mitchell. Now these issues and these happenings in that authority cannot happen, and the people responsible for that authority go without blemish unblamed. There has to be consequences. People died, abuse continued, and that has been stated by this task force report of Judith Jones. So if we focus on that report and Webster Roy's failure to move with alacrity, then we realize that something was being kept from the public. Was it the responsibility of the director Nicola Harvey Mitchell and the role she played in what happened to those two boys? Is it a fact then that director of that Children's Authority then, Nicola Harvey Mitchell, couldn't account for why those boys and other places were not secured, why inadequate food was provided to the children under the Children's Authority? And we think it is instructive, especially on this Mother's Day. How does Ayanna Webster Roy and Pete Rowley account to the mothers of the nation? Because a mother's pain is real. It cuts across all socio-economic lines, all demographics. So this national trauma that Pete Rowley and the PNM has inflicted on the nation is what comes out of this report as most glaring and most striking. Because you have to remember, this happened to those boys in March of 2021. And here we are, a year and months later, being traumatized by a report coming out of those murders of those boys. We have to ask, what did Ayanna Webster Roy do? And there are two scenarios. If she got that report, sat on it, without informing the Prime Minister, she has to be fired immediately. On the other hand, if she took that report to the Prime Minister and he sat on it for 5 months, he has to fire himself. Or ask the country to decide if he should be fired. Because this is something that strikes at the heart of the soul of the nation. This is not only the mothers of Simeon Daniel and Antonio Francois who called the mothers and complained of sexual abuse and that they were informed them later and subsequently killed. Dead boys tell no tales. This strikes at every mother in Trinidad and Tobago who would have noticed the report and seen the type of abuse, rape, physical, that we thought having a Children's Authority with a budget of 64 million in the previous 6 years until last year increased to $18 million. And I know the tragic deaths of Simeon Daniel, Antonio Francois, the rape, the abuse going on in the homes in the 5 months that report was sat on. We know the budget pales in comparison to that kind of abuse. But it's significant because we've had past directors of the Children Authority. We've had, for example, Hanif Benjamin proclaim that the authority is not under-resourced. And that tells us a lot. So when we have insipid statements like there are systemic challenges in the Children's Authority, yes, but people are in charge of those systems. So we just don't talk about systemic challenges without realizing the human capacity for error and what occurred within the Children's Authority. So here we go to what I find is something very telling by former independent senator Helen Drayton, where she says, the findings of the Justice Judith Jones Committee include failure to safeguard children in residential care institutions and inadequate and ineffective state coordination and collaboration. Well, here we go again. Who's responsible for that ineffective state coordination and collaboration? It goes back to the Prime Minister, Keith Rowley, under whose jurisdiction the Children's Authority ultimately falls. It goes back to Ayanna Webster-Roy and their culpability in this national trauma. She goes on. The authority, commenting of course on the task force report, the authority has not demonstrated the will, intention and mechanism to shut down the operation of unlicensed homes that continue to put children at risk in Trinidad and Tobago. And now we have a report and the testimony of Ayanna Webster-Roy, where she stated that the Margaret Christo Children's Home is funded to the tune of $75,000 a month. $75,000 a month. It has been recommended that this home be closed down. And her response to that was, we can't close it down. Abuse has been noted at that home, and she responded that that home cannot be shut down. And we have to ask ourselves why. How much more can Trinidad and Tobago put up with a trauma, a national trauma, not only to the mothers of these boys as stated, of the people in those homes, the kids in those homes, but to the national community. This affects everybody. This is a trauma that affects the psyche of all mothers, all people across Trinidad and Tobago. And I'll tell you something anecdotal. My mother has passed, but I have like a second mother who literally brought me up as well in Shafler. And I'm talking to her and Jennifer, and she says to me, David, if I had that report in December, I would have run to the Prime Minister's office. I would have run, not walk, run to the Prime Minister's office and told him, look, and Ayanna Webster-Roy is a mother. She is a mother. So where is the empathy? Not only from her, but also from Keith Rowley. No, we're not buying what you're selling about heartbreak and so. The heartbreak that we are concerned about is the heartbreak of those parents that put those kids in the care of the state. We are talking about a heartbreak that the taxpayers are looking on with horror at what takes place in those residential homes under the jurisdiction of the Children's Authority. That is the heartbreak there. How are they to feel? And you know, we quote from Nelson Mandela. There can be no keener revelation of a society's soul than the way in which it treats its children. And we are a society, you know, we like to look to revolutionaries like Nelson Mandela, but then we never see to go through in what they say. And again, we believe as a party that is instructive that despite this national trauma, national attention turned on the Children's Authority, the Prime Minister responsible for that authority, responsible directly under his office, has not issued one word about that, about the authority. Not offered a word of condolence to the mother of Simeon Daniel or Antonio Francois. And we have to ask ourselves why. I mean, you have time to be on a golf course, you have time to be in places probably you shouldn't be as Prime Minister, but you're not doing the things that you need to do, not only to secure our children, but at least placate the mothers, placate the national psyche. Then what is your job as Prime Minister? What is your job? What is your job description? To buff the nation, to go to bat for the banks, to go to bat for amalgamated security. What is your job description? Not to keep our children safe, the most vulnerable in the society. Because when we look at the escalating crime, we are allowing this government to sow the seeds that we will reap that ill-fated reward later on down the road. That is what is going to happen. Nothing happens in isolation. So when we allow Pete Rowley, Ayanna Webster Roy, Nicola Harvey Mitchell, if you allow them to get away with what happened at this Children's Authority, then we can't come and complain. What will happen 5 years, 6 years, 7 years down the road? Because all studies show children who are abused and are not rehabilitated tend to go on to commit the same crimes or even worse crimes. And that is why we are calling for accountability in this regard. That is why we are calling for Pete Rowley to immediately fire Ayanna Webster Roy. And if it turns out that he knew about that report in December 2021, then he has to fire himself. It is unacceptable to the national community that our children in state care, properly financed, are treated the way they were treated and are still being treated. So we as a party look forward to a resolution to this. We do not accept what comes out of their mouths now. That is Ayanna Webster Roy talking about 126 million now to be given. No, how is that possible? We want an audit of the Children's Authority before any further money is given. There's an $80 million budget they have now. By my calculations, after recurrent expenditure, that means per child per year, it's $80,000. By that figure, those children should be living quite comfortably. And we know, as a population, that is not the case. So we are calling before $126 million, double the budget of that Children's Authority is spent and suggested by Ayanna Webster. We want a full audit of the Children's Authority to know where that money has gone over the last years. Because if it should have, in fact, the Children's Authority was no more than a PNM party group, then heads really have to roll. Because these children have been treated in the worst manner that any society can treat them. So, in closing, I would like the nation, in recovering from a national trauma, once again inflicted by this PNM government. We had recently, of course, the case of the pioneer divers, also a national trauma. When is enough enough? When will we hold Pete Rowley and the people he has put in charge of our security, our safety? I mean, Martin Daly referred to Fitzgerald Hines as hapless. As hapless. When you have, I think that was an Express editorial, referred to Fitzgerald Hines as a hapless in that position. When you get that kind of condemnation from the media, then it sends a signal that this government has outlived its usefulness, its purpose to the people of Trinidad and Tobago. And they must resign, and resign now. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Senator David Nakhid, for focusing on the findings of the report into abuse at children's homes throughout our country that was chaired by Madam Justice Judith Jones, and focusing on the responsibility of the Minister of Gender Affairs in the Office of the Prime Minister, Ayanna Webster-Roy, and the Prime Minister was ultimate responsibility in this matter, and calling for Minister Ayanna Webster-Roy to do the honorable thing and resign, or to be fired by the Prime Minister. And this leads me to the very important and critical issue of the week that can turn out to be the most sordid affair in the political history of Trinidad and Tobago since our independence. Because we have known the PNM to be associated with scandals since their assumption into power in 1956. If you know the political history of this country, Lockjoint and the Jean Miles gas station racket, and under Prime Minister Dr. Keith Rowley, the ANV oil and gas fiasco into the Carbo Star, into the vessels that were acquired for the Coast Guard, and we could go on and on in terms of fiascos that continue to plague the PNM, whether it was under Williams or Prime Minister Williams or Manning, and now Prime Minister Dr. Keith Rowley. And this country would know that on Thursday evening last, Opposition Senator Jayanti Lakshmi revealed the contents of a special branch report into the dealings of Minister Foster Cummings, the Minister of Youth Development and National Service and Member of Parliament for La Hoqueta Talparu. This report emerged from an investigation conducted into Minister Cummings while he was a government senator in 2019. While all of the allegations into the reports were damning and of key concern to me were the allegation that then Senator Cummings was involved in land grabbing for commercial and personal gain, apparently within the constituency of Hoover South. And this leads me to the very critical issue of whether the Prime Minister has apparently unleashed a serial land grabber on the constituents of Hoover South. And I want to warn all constituents, if you have an unsecured piece of land, you need to move with haste and use either chain link wire, galvanize any kind of material to secure your premises or your property from the actions of the serial land grabber. And the other allegations that Minister Cummings used his political influence to secure AGC contract for two companies owned or linked to him are indeed riveting, and additionally that the allegation that Minister Cummings was attempting to coax or coerce residents of Edinburgh 500 so that he could justify a self-serving contract for the construction of a community center in Edinburgh 500 can only be described as alarming. Finally, the allegations that Minister Cummings hired a reputed drug dealer and gang leader as a subcontractor for companies strikes as at the heart of the issue of facilitating and financing criminal activities, as we see yet another person in the leadership of the PNM in bed with criminals or in bed with persons who are allegedly well-known criminals. We must never forget that former Prime Minister Patrick Manning hosted a series of a group of gang leaders that he termed to be community leaders at a grand affair at then what was known as Crown Plaza and so on. And my friends, Trinidad and Tobago, it is noteworthy that these allegations do not stem from a political document. This is a document that is dated the 5th of July 2019. It is from the Office of the Assistant Commissioner of Special Branch of the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service. It has a reference 105/4/2 in brackets capital T 57 of 2019. So this is not a political document such as we saw when Rowley came to the Parliament with email gate, but stems from what is referred to an authentic special branch report. It is instructive to note that as at this morning, after 3 days, no one from the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service or the Minister of National Security, Fitzgerald Hines, has denied the conduct of such an investigation nor the existence of any such report. One would imagine that if this investigation had never taken place, and that if the report was not authentic, and if the opposition claims were not true, and its concerns not justified, then by now the police service through its commissioner or deputy commissioner or any other officer would have said so. Ladies and gentlemen of the media, these allegations strike to the core of corruption which has been rampant on this PNM administration and unfortunately seems to be condoned by Prime Minister Dr. Keith Rowley. And as I said, this report did not originate from the UNC's head office or that of the leader of the opposition, Kamla Persad-Bissessar. And in that regard, it is now falls on the responsibility now falls on Minister Foster Cummings to prove that he has committed no wrongdoing as it relates to his land acquisition and his business dealings are above board. I want to tell Minister Foster Cummings here this morning that it is not the UNC that wants to sully his name or his character. He must tell Trinidad and Tobago he is not holding a private office. He's being paid by the taxpayers of this country, and he needs to tell the country and provide the evidence to clear his name and to prove that he is indeed above board based on the existence of this report, because it was the government through its former Attorney General Faris Al-Rawi who indicated that to place the burden of proof on the accused of committing wrongdoing, he indicated that it is of importance to ensure that whoever is accused, they must be afforded the opportunity to prove themselves otherwise. And indeed, we must also remember that when Prime Minister Rowley was challenged in the email gate fiasco, and when the Integrity Commission found or could not substantiate what he had put forward, he said that the only institution he had trust was in the police service to investigate this matter. And it is for these reasons and the interest of the taxpayers of Trinidad and Tobago, the Prime Minister must answer some very serious questions, because this morning, I hold no brief for former Commissioner of Police Gary Griffith, but as a member of Parliament and someone sworn to uphold the law, when a former Commissioner of Police can tell you that I gave PM police report on Cummings, we have to ask, what did the Prime Minister do when he got this report? And also, political analyst calls on Prime Minister to act on the special branch report. And this is why Foster Cummings, while he must clear himself, this is a sordid affair that lies at the doorstep of the Prime Minister, and it involves a number of government ministers. And these are the questions that they must answer. Was the Prime Minister, as head of the National Security Council, aware that Special Branch was investigating one of his sitting government senators? Was the Prime Minister aware that the Special Branch produced a report on said Minister Cummings? Was the Prime Minister aware of the contents of the report made by Special Branch into Minister Cummings' business dealings? If the Prime Minister was aware of the contents of the report, then what action did the Prime Minister take at that point in time? Additionally, if the Prime Minister was made aware of these allegations, were these allegations disproved by then Senator Cummings for the Special Branch themselves? Then I have to ask, and the UNC is asking this very critical question: why then did the Prime Minister see it fit to make Mr. Foster Cummings a candidate in the 2020 general election and subsequently appoint him to the cabinet to become the Minister of Youth Development and National Service? And then a number of questions must be focused or pointed in the direction of persons who comprised or still are within the cabinet of Trinidad and Tobago, and in one particular instance, in the interest of transparency and accountability. This is one of the pillars that Prime Minister Dr. Rowley championed in campaigning. And having regard for the recent exit of former Senator and Minister of Agriculture, Land and Fisheries, Marine Resources, Clarence Rambarat, from the cabinet, did the report and allegations of Minister in relation to or against Minister Cummings cause Minister Rambarat to resign or to run from Trinidad and Tobago? The nation would recall that former Minister Rambarat, in speaking about his resignation, indicated that he had learned of senior public officials being involved in land grabbing and was assisting police to investigate those who may have been guilty of such an offense. And that leads me to the very important question. When the Prime Minister, I'm reading from an Express article, the 24th of March 2022, headline: Rowley, no cabinet minister in state land fraud. It was written by Anna Ramdas and facing a question under Prime Minister's question at the Parliament when posed by Dr. Rudal Munilal, and who asked, could you confirm whether or not those reports that came to you involved the conduct of any current cabinet minister in this sordid affair of stealing lands? The Prime Minister stated, Madam Speaker, I am happy to report that none of the reports, none of the documents provided to me on this particular subject involves any person in the cabinet which I lead. And further, Prime Minister, can you indicate whether in this matter, as you did with complaints about firearms and so on, you ought to establish a committee to investigate the validity of claims by former Minister of Agriculture in widespread corruption in land dealing, and the Prime Minister indicated that he listened to what was said, read what was provided, and instructed the Minister to report the information to the Commissioner of Police. So the country needs to know, why did former Minister Clarence Rambara choose to run from the cabinet of Dr. Keith Rowley? And the country needs to know if indeed there is a special branch report on former Minister Clarence Rambara. Did the Prime Minister cause the exit of Clarence Rambara by force or by resignation so the Prime Minister could continue to protect Minister Foster Cummings? Is Foster Cummings a political ally of the Prime Minister within the PNM? And did the Prime Minister turn a blind eye to Minister Cummings' dealing, since he may need Minister Cummings' support in the upcoming internal PNM elections, because he is the General Secretary of the People's National Movement. He is in possession of the database as it relates to the PNM's membership, and while he could have sanctioned or approved of the exit of Minister Rambara, we are asking, why is Minister Cummings still on the compound? Further to the above questions, there are several questions which has to be asked, and these are as follows. To Clarence Rambara, are you aware of this special branch report into the dealings of Minister Cummings? And was he, according to your knowledge, allegedly involved in land grabbing? Were allegations made against Minister Cummings by the special branch report in any way responsible for your resignation from the cabinet? Is it that the former minister tried to stop Minister Cummings from land grabbing for commercial or personal gain and was asked to resign from the cabinet? And I would like to ask Minister Camille Robinson Regis whether she, when she was the Minister of Planning and Development with responsibility for town and country, was she aware of any information or complaints which may have been raised by the division against Senator Cummings and his alleged exploits? If there was a land grabbing issue as indicated by special branch, then one would assume that the Town and Country Division would have been made aware of such issue, and the line minister may have been made aware of such a situation. Did the Town and Country Division or the Ministry of Planning receive such reports from special branch, and what did the Information Division or Ministry do with the information therein? Was the Minister of Planning and Development at the time, Camille Robinson Regis, turning a blind eye to the exploits of a PNM colleague, who is interestingly now her cabinet colleague? I would also like to ask the Minister of Local Government, Kazim Hussain. He too oversees the Office of the Commissioner of State Lands, and the report, the special branch report, indicates that indeed it says, and I want to read, Cummings has claimed 3 parcels of land belonging to HDC as his own, 2 parcels located at the Southern Main Road, Couva, and a third at Ibis Avenue, Couva. I am told that these lands were identified by HDC to construct a children's play park. And indeed, if Kazim Hussain can tell us if there's an investigation in relation to the Office of the Commissioner of State Land, and whether he knows, or the Office of the Commissioner of State Land knows, whether Cummings has claimed 3 parcels of HDC land. And if indeed Cummings is saying that he is above board, then he must provide whether he bought the land from HDC, whether he leased the land, and under what terms and conditions. And we are saying that Kazim Hussein must get the Commissioner of State, or Office of the Commissioner of State Land, to provide the evidence. The Minister of Housing, the substantive minister now, is Camille Robinson-Regis. And I'm sure that indeed within the Housing Development Corporation, its files, we must get also the documentation to see or to assist Minister Cummings to clear his name, because he's saying that it is the agenda of the UNC to sully his name and tarnish his character. Provide the evidence, provide the documents that you bought these lands or you leased these lands from HDC and under what terms and conditions. And certainly these 2 ministers, Kazim Hussein and Camille Robinson-Regis, can assist us. And also, I want to ask Minister Kazim Hussein, the Minister of then local government, whether he was aware of this special branch report and the allegations that Mr. Cummings' company received garbage collection contract within the jurisdiction of the Kuva Tabaki Talparo Regional Corporation, and this contract did not go through the normal process of the Kuva Tabaki Talparo Regional Corporation normal tendering process. Was Minister Hussein placed deliberately in the Ministry of Agriculture, Land and Fisheries by the Prime Minister to cover up any investigation into these sordid land dealings? And but for the Prime Minister and but for Minister Cummings and the PNM in this instance, I would also like to ask Minister Stuart Young, who was Minister of National Security at the time of this report, whether he was aware of the special branch report into Senator Cummings. Did Minister Young seek to influence the conduct of any investigation or actions against Minister Cummings subsequent to the release of these reports? Was Minister Young aware, as a former minister, of the alleged link between Minister Cummings' companies and the leader of the said gangs? Because this is a government that pontifies themselves as being sanctimonious and clean, and they have a sense of purity in terms of the way they conduct themselves. They always waving documents in and outside of the parliament of this country, telling the country that it is UNC minister MPs and former UNC ministers who had relationships with gang leaders and drug dealers and so on in this country. But here you have a special branch report indicting a current clearly pointing in the direction of a existing cabinet minister, and everybody from captain to cook, as we would say, are silent. We must take note, ladies and gentlemen, that these allegations strike to the heart of the fight against crime in this country. And before I end this morning, I want to take the opportunity to call upon the Minister of National Security and also the Minister with responsibility for agriculture and state land, and also the Office of the Commissioner of State Land, to point them in a direction, because information has also come to me that there is a piece of land formerly one of these extension offices in the jurisdiction or within the geography of Centeno, a Plainview Drive in Las Lomas number 2. It belongs to the Ministry of Agriculture, Land and Marine Resources. I am told an area of land has been bulldozed, our office was demolished, and word on the ground is some serial land grabber is moving in the direction to block off and fence this particular piece of land. So to establish, I do not know if it is for a political office or an office for personal business transaction, because we know of other offices of former the Exchange Section Office of Caroni 1975 Limited. We know of areas within Cuba and so on. And as I said, this abuse has to stop. And also, in this regard, as it relates to land grabbing in Indian Trail, the Minister of Local Government must tell us, why did the Cuba Tabaqui Talparo Regional Corporation issue a discontinuance notice to Pical Services Limited on the 7th of February 2022. It was served on Pical Services Limited at 2:30 p.m. on the 7th of February 2022, and it stated that this entity was carrying out unauthorized engineering and excavation on the Indian Trail recreation ground without prior approvals from the Cuba Tabaqui Talparo Regional Corporation. And you know, I posed a question on this particular issue in the Parliament on the 25th of February 2022, and Minister Diyal Singh answered the question on behalf of the Minister of Rural Development and Local Government. And the question was, has the Ministry of Local Government awarded a contract for the upgrade of the recreation ground, Indian Trail recreation ground? And it said, I can say that the Ministry of Rural Development and Local Government has not awarded any contract for the upgrade of the Indian Trail recreation ground. But why was equipment belonging to Pical on this recreation ground? And why did the corporation have to issue a certificate of or discontinuance notice, members of the media? So is it that ministers of government continue to lie, they continue to cover up? And as I said, it is important whether that these allegations that have been made here in this special branch report begs the question as to whether the subcontracting of the gang leader in question by Minister Cummings' companies was a deliberate attempt by this government to channel funds to criminal elements using taxpayers' funds in exchange for political support. This country will recollect that another minister of government under the PNM was charged while in office for misbehavior in public office shortly after she attended her own ministerial inauguration at President's House with someone who was well reputed to be a gang leader from her own constituency. It is the PNM style to associate and do business with drug lords and gangsters and hide as though they are innocent of such. Ladies and gentlemen, we see here, what we see here is a possible web of wrongdoing and cover-up in typical PNM style. This morning, the United National Congress, under the leadership of Kamla Prasad Bisesa, asked these questions on behalf of the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago. The document which was revealed was not a political document. It was not a UNC document. It was not a PNM document. It was, in fact, a document created and compiled by the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service. The information about Minister Cummings and allegations against Minister Cummings are extremely serious and must be taken seriously by this country. And in this regard, this morning, we are calling for Minister Foster Cummings to do the honorable thing and resign. And if he has no decency and integrity, then the Prime Minister must fire Minister Foster Cummings. And in that regard too, Minister Hines, before I end, Minister Hines told the country that he was alarmed by the special branch report in terms of its leak. He should be alarmed about the conduct of a colleague in his cabinet, because this is a gentleman, the Minister of National Security, continues to boast about the PNM, prides itself on integrity and transparency and accountability as it relates to good governance and so on. And he has now assumed the role of being the Minister of National Security. Trinidad and Tobago is reeling as it relates to crime. 193 murders in 125 days. And he too, if he had any decency and integrity, he would resign as Minister of National Security and spare the citizens of this country his incompetence and lack of leadership in fighting crime. We must never forget that he said it was not his job to provide safety or make citizens feel safe. And if he cannot do the honorable thing and resign too, then the Prime Minister has a duty and responsibility to fire Minister of National Security, Fitzgerald Hines. I thank you. Having said this and put forward our submissions, myself and Senator Nakhid will now make ourselves available to members of the media for further questioning. And as I said, we want to continue to wish all the mothers of Trinidad and Tobago a very happy and blissful and enjoyable day. Thank you.
Senator Nakhid, in terms of the report into the children's homes in Trinidad and Tobago, we know that it would have been said that there is a process looking into the authority, do you think that we would have seen legislative changes over the years as it relates to the Children's Act, Children's Authority, etc.? But do you think that the time has come for even more to be done? We know that it has been said that they are indeed looking into the authority and looking into its redesign, etc. But will the opposition be pushing for even greater legislative changes as it relates to children's homes and even the Children's Act itself?
Well, sometimes the problems could be legislative, or sometimes it could just be a matter of implementation. Now, I think when it comes to this government, it has been the latter. Nothing has been implemented as far as, because there are legislation in place within the authority to account for what goes on in these children's homes. As a matter of fact, the Children's Authority has its own investigative unit. And then we hear reports that children were being abused and raped before the incidents of Simeon Daniel and Antonio Francois, and this was brought out by the task force. So that means it's not about legislation. I mean, we can legislate the whole live long day, but when you come to the implementation, it's a matter of political will. Are you going to get it done? And if you haven't gotten it done, the question is why? And that is what we are asking of Prime Minister Keith Rowley and Ayanna Webster Roy. Why didn't they implement or put things in place to find out what happened? And even if they have excuses as far as that goes, that report was put in December 2021. Why 5 months later, abuse takes place, and you come to tell us you are heartbroken? No, it's about the implementation. This government never implemented the necessary process to investigate these things properly. We have to ask ourselves, with the budget that they have been handed, why were corners cut? Why were corners cut? And that was alluded to by Hanif Benjamin, former director. Why were corners being cut? Why not the correct personnel? Now, Director Nicola Harvey Mitchell, I have looked at her profile. She has made no mention whatsoever in any of her social media that she had any relationship with the Children's Authority. That is very strange. She has nothing related as of yesterday. I looked. There's nothing that relates or links her to the Children's Authority that she was in charge of. So that it seems to me that there's a cover-up going on, and that's why they waited, as our political leader alluded to, 5 months before they brought it to the public's attention, that report. So it's not about legislation in this regard. I think it's about implementation or lack of it by the government. I think it's another chance for them, 126 million, to look into a report, to make a report of a report. Come on. It's about time we say enough is enough. This government needs to account for the abuse of these kids. Either they account for it with transparency, or they get fired, they resign, they go. But enough is enough. The public, the nation has been traumatized enough by accounts of these young children being abused in state care. In state care.
One further question. In the report, it also noted that there were, children who, after transitioning out of the homes, went to some of the homes of employees, etc. And we know that legislatively, there is no provision after a child would have transitioned out of the home. In that regard, do you think that legislative amendments are needed there?
Yeah, well, there obviously were some gaps, loopholes within the current legislation. But the major point is, for example, we know that after 12 weeks, there should have been a review of cases. No child was supposed to stay longer than 12 weeks. We knew that didn't happen. There were children there for years. So, but that again goes back to implementation. So although there are gaps, there's what we call human initiative. So if you put somebody who is not qualified, ex-director, Nicola Harvey Mitchell, none of her qualifications point to her being suitable for that particular job, to run a Children's Authority. So why, and she was an ex-PNM candidate for Port and Spain South. So obviously this was a political appointment. Why would you do that to the children of the nation? Why wouldn't you bring a professional, someone who could guarantee that things would be implemented, or even if there were gaps, would have the institutional knowledge to plug those gaps? And I think that's where we were lacking.
MP Aaron Singh, we have one question. The Prime Minister has repeatedly said on platforms that no member of his government is under police investigation in the past. Given these latest revelations regarding Minister Cummings, do you think he needs to properly explain?
That is our position here this morning. We have, as the loyal opposition of Trinidad and Tobago, we have always will hold the government to account, whether it is the Prime Minister or members of his cabinet. And the Prime Minister apparently has a problem with speaking the truth. In his last 7 years leading this country on a number of issues, the famous closure of Petrotrin, and if you had your head in the fridge and the government was not closing down Petrotrin. So this is our Prime Minister. When he speaks, you cannot trust his words, but we would call upon him to do the descending and provide the information. We are providing the opportunity to have him as the Prime Minister and head of the cabinet to use his prime ministerial responsibility and get Minister Foster Cummings to clear his name, provide the country with the information, and if not, he must fire him from his cabinet and additionally we in the UNC, we know the track record of this government. They hide for one another. They lie for one another. They bat for one another. They cover up for one another. So, calling upon the Prime Minister to provide a proper explanation, that is our role and responsibility. Whether the Prime Minister will do the honorable thing, the decent thing, and ensure that he provides the proper leadership that will show transparency, accountability, and good governance. The ball is then now in your court, Prime Minister Rowley.
And just one question for Senator Nakhid. Senator Nakhid, Minister Webster Roy has stated that a task force will be set up to look into the findings of this report. Do you have confidence in this task force?
But you see, that's the ridiculous kind of things that this country cannot take anymore. You have a task force report, and now you're establishing a task force to the tune of 126 million to investigate a task force report. Instead of doing what should be done, that is clean up the Children's Authority based on the report findings. But to do that, you have to have accountability and transparency. And this government clearly does not have that. And we have alluded to that over the course of this press conference. It's about whether that money allocated to the Children's Authority was used for the benefit of the children and the personnel in charge of those children. Obviously not. So now you come in with 126 million with another task force to investigate a task force. We've had enough. The people of Trinidad and Tobago, the mothers of Trinidad and Tobago, across the board, across all demographics, they've had enough.
Well, thank you very much, members of the media, for your questions. Trinidad and Tobago, we thank you for once again viewing our Sunday morning press conference on behalf of the Leader of the Opposition and members of our great party, the United National Congress. We again want to reinforce our best wishes to all mothers of Trinidad and Tobago. Thank you very much.
Happy Mother's Day to all.